Hi, my name is Aaron and I'm here today to talk to you about the basic settings on a DSLR camera. I'm using a D7000 for this tutorial, but all digital cameras work with the same basic settings, and that's what we'll be looking at today. Your camera may have more or less features than this particular model depending on the type of camera that you have. So we're going to have a look at how these work on this camera. Let's get into it. This is a standard digital camera. I'm using a Nikon D7000 for this demonstration, but I'm going to be looking at the controls that basically any digital camera will have and how to make them work. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to turn the camera on, and on this camera and on most cameras the switch is at the top and you easily just flick it from off to on. The first button here on the top of the camera is of course the shutter button, which you press to take a photo. Then there are two buttons here. This is the exposure meter reading, and that just changes how the camera is looking through the lens to decide what settings are the best to use. This button here with the plus and minus on it, it is the button that you would use if your camera only has one dial on the front and you want to change the aperture or the shutter speed depending on your camera model. And if you're using one of the automatic settings, you can tell the camera that you want the photograph to be more or less exposed than it thinks is the perfect exposure. Sometimes it's not exactly right and you want to change something because the background is brighter or the background is darker. Across the other side of the camera here, we have the main function dial. As you can see, it's currently set to M, which stands for manual. You have A for aperture, S for shutter speed, P for program or automatic. And then depending on your camera model, you might have some other options here than the ones that I have. There's usually no flash and then some scene options. You might also have things like a little flower that represents macro photography, or a mountain which represents landscape, a running person which represents sports. So depending on what your camera model is, you will have a variety of different things on that, and your manual will tell you exactly what they mean. If your camera is like mine and you've just got the word scene, I can actually go into that and it gives me an extra menu inside the camera, and from there I can select a range of different shooting environments to tell my camera what I would like it to do. On the other side we have the LCD screen, and the LCD screen gives you a whole bunch of different information. Particularly this large number here is the number of shots left in the SD card. This little icon here is telling me which SD card is being used. This particular model camera has 2 SD card slots. It also tells me that it's shooting in RAW format, tells me how much battery there is, and the second box down is telling me what the flash is doing. It's currently in automatic mode. It also tells me which focus point the camera is using. At the moment, all of them, because the camera is in auto. If I change that to one of the manual settings, I can then adjust that using the buttons on the back, and I will show you how to do that in just a moment. So on the back of the camera we have here the auto exposure and focus lock button, which you can use to control the exposure and the focus. If your object is changing or the environment is changing in your shot, you can use that to lock either the exposure or the focus so that you don't have to worry about it changing or moving. Then there is the video control. So this turns the live view on, and you can press the red button to start video recording. Then there's the directional key and the OK button. So this is the main menu control, up, down, left, right. It will also let you alter the focus point, so I will show you that later. This is the lock mechanism, so you can actually lock this directional key so that you don't accidentally bump it while you're taking photos when the camera's up to your head. Okay, and then there's the info button here, which gives us a display reading on the back of the camera. So there's the display, so we're in manual mode. It's giving me the shutter speed and the aperture, and also the exposure reading, the battery, the exposure point. I've also got the ISO, what the white balance is on, it's currently on automatic, and how many photos are left to be taken. And on this side I've got the exposure point that the camera is using, and if I use the directional key you can see that that little point moves around. And I'm also being told that it's shooting in RAW format as opposed to JPEG. Then there are the buttons down the side here. We've got the quality button, which changes again with the dial. I can change that so I'm now shooting in JPEG, and I've got basic, normal and fine. And you can also see the number of photos that the camera can take inside each of those settings is different. Okay, but I had photo shoot in RAW. And then there's also the button to change the ISO. And again, we're just using that back dial to make those changes. You know, I like to keep mine set on 100, but we'll talk more about ISO in another video. And then there's also the white balance button, which you can use with the back dial to scroll through the different auto settings for the white balance. Then the next button is the menu button. And again, using the directional key, you can scroll through the different menu items, and there's a whole bunch of of them. Your camera will have a range of different menu items. Every camera is a little bit different, so check your manual if you're looking for something specific in the menu. But I do recommend that you go through the menu and have a look to see what settings you can change. And then there's the playback button, which we can use just to scroll through the pictures that are currently on the camera. And if you scroll up, you also get a readout about the information of that particular photo. So we've got the histogram, the details of that photo, and also some technical information about when and where it was taken. And then there is the delete button, pretty self-explanatory. And then the last thing we're going to look at the back here is underneath this dial is this secondary dial. Press this button down. You can scroll through a range of things here. So on this one, it's single shutter, and then multi-shutters, timer, and also a remote setting if you want to use the remote control. Spinning the camera around, looking at the side here, we have the main button that takes the lens off, and then we have a couple of autofocus options. So this one has manual and autofocus both on the body and on the lens. So if your camera doesn't have the autofocus motor in the body, you'll just have it on the lens. And you've also got here the stabilizer, so I can turn that on or off. There's a button to set the bracketing features on the camera. So bracketing is just taking one photo at what the camera thinks is the best setting, and then one slightly under and one slightly over. And then the button above here is the button that controls the flash. So if I press that once, the flash will pop up. Put it away by pressing down. And if I want to change the way the flash is being utilized by the camera, I can hold the flash button down and use the back scroll to change the features on the flash. So I can have red eye flash, or I can tell it to run through the rear curtain. So that means it flashes as the shutter is closing as opposed to when the shutter is opening. And I can also increase or decrease the brightness of the flash. Those are all of the basic features for using a DSLR camera. If you liked this video, please make sure to comment, click the little thumbs up button, and subscribe to my channel for more videos on how to use digital cameras and how to work with the basics of photography. Until then, happy shooting.